Have you ever been totally baffled by a student? One minute they're on task, totally capable, and the next they seem completely defiant? Well, it turns out it's often not about willpower or character at all. It's about biology. So let's dive into this and explore how stress literally rewires the brain and what that means for how we see behavior.
Okay, let's start with this statement right here, because it's a big one, and it's really the foundation for everything we're going to talk about. Behavior is not a moral choice. The idea is that when students are stressed or overwhelmed, their ability to make good choices it temporarily goes offline. What we're seeing isn't a moral failure, it's a predictable biological response.
And this slide just nails the shift in perspective we need to make. On the left, you've got the old way of thinking, right? We react to behavior with judgment, and we ask, what consequence fits this behavior? But look at the right. The new approach responds with curiosity. It's driven by a totally different question. What state is this student in right now? That one little shift changes everything. It moves us from just punishing a behavior to actually addressing its root cause.
So let's get into the science of it. When we talk about a student's state, what we're really talking about is what's happening inside their brain when it's under pressure. And this is so important. It's a biological process, not a conscious decision to be difficult. Every single one of us has a threat response system built into our brain. You can think of it like your own personal smoke detector or internal alarm. When it perceives a threat, and that could be a real danger or it could just be the stress of feeling overwhelmed in class, it kicks into high gear. And it prioritizes just one thing above all else: survival.
So what happens when that alarm goes off? It's fascinating, really. Your brain's core functions change. Your attention, for instance, narrows down to a tiny spotlight, focusing only on the threat. Your emotional reactions get dialed way up. Your working memory, which is kind of like the RAM in your computer, it just shrinks. It gets overloaded. And maybe most importantly, your ability to think logically and reason through things, it just grinds to a halt. The thinking part of the brain literally takes a back seat.
And here's the bottom line. That student who's talking back or refusing to do their work or just completely shutting down, that's not necessarily defiance. It's much, much more likely that you're looking at a brain that is flipped into protection mode. The behavior you see is just a symptom of the stress, it's not the problem itself.
This brings us to a really key idea. What happens when that thinking part of the brain shuts down? Because, emotion and thinking aren't separate things operating in isolation. They are deeply biologically intertwined. You absolutely cannot have one without affecting the other.
So often, we treat emotions like they're some kind of distraction from learning. But the reality is, emotion drives cognition. Think about it. A student who's feeling anxious or embarrassed is using a huge amount of their mental energy just to manage those feelings. That leaves very little brain power left over for things like paying attention, making good decisions, or controlling their impulses.
And this leads us to a super useful concept called cognitive load. Again, think of your working memory like the RAM on a computer. It has a limited capacity, right? It can get totally overloaded if you try to run too many programs at the same time. And just look at everything a student's brain is juggling in any given moment. It's never just about the academic task. It's the teacher's instructions, it's the social stuff going on around them, it's their own feelings, plus every single sight and sound in the room. It's a massive amount of data to process all at once.
And this is so important to get. When that cognitive load gets too high, the whole system can crash. But what crashes first isn't learning, it's behavior. This explains so much, like why disruptions so often happen during complicated, multi-step tasks or during those chaotic transitions. The brain is simply overloaded.
Okay, so we've got the biology down. Now, let's connect it directly to the behaviors we see every day, the stuff that can be so frustrating and confusing. Let's try to reinterpret what those behaviors might actually mean.
This is the big question, right? Why does a brain in survival mode so often look like a student who seems oppositional or defiant? Well, the answer really boils down to one word: control. This table lays it all out perfectly. When we see a student arguing, their brain is often desperately trying to find a sense of control in a situation that feels totally chaotic. When we see refusal, it's an attempt to feel autonomous, to have some say. These behaviors, they're not really about disrespect. They're just clumsy, instinctive attempts to regain a feeling of safety and to lower that overwhelming cognitive load.
So, what happens when our gut reaction is to meet this with more control, a harsher tone, a bigger consequence? We accidentally confirm to that student's brain that there is a threat.
And that just escalates the stress response, it makes the disruption last longer, and it can really damage the very relationship we need to help that student feel safe again.
Now, I know this all sounds pretty complex, but the solutions are surprisingly straightforward. It's really about shifting our goal from managing behavior to managing the brain state. So let's take a look at what's in this new toolkit.
The guiding principle couldn't be simpler, but it is so powerful. Regulation before correction. You simply cannot teach or correct a brain that's stuck in survival mode. It's just not possible. So the first step, always, is to help the student get back to a calm, regulated state where their thinking brain can finally come back online.
So this means our focus totally shifts. Instead of punishment, we build predictability through things like clear schedules and routines. Instead of just reacting, we create a structure that helps lower that cognitive load and makes the world feel more solid and safe. We use calm, neutral language. Our goal isn't to lower expectations, but to create the conditions where students can actually meet them.
And the best part is, you can start right away. These 5 shifts are so practical and so powerful. When routines become automatic, it frees up mental energy. Breaking tasks down prevents that cognitive overload. Normalizing mistakes removes the threat of embarrassment. See, each one of these strategies works by reducing stress at the brain level, which makes regulation and then learning possible.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. The next time you see a really challenging behavior, just pause and ask yourself, what if this isn't defiance? What if this is just a brain in protection mode? What if this is actually a call for safety? Changing the question you ask yourself, well, it just might change everything.